Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias, brought to you by the Cat Production Team.
I love trappers. I hate trappers. I love trappers. I hate trappers. I love trappers. I hate trappers. Don't forget about me. I'm a trapper too. Since when are you a trapper? Since somebody in marketing said I'm a trapper. I love being a trapper. Ooh, what about me? Can I be a trapper too? I can be a mushroom trapper. Please? And so the debate rages on. I was just on YouTube, saw Mark Kaufman's video, I Hate Trappers, followed up almost immediately by RJ Knives, I Love Trappers. And both of them gave good arguments on why they love or hate the trapper. Now, I've given my opinion on the trapper on many occasions. Everyone knows what side of that fence I fall on. And that side of that fence really is not so much about the knife itself, but the way the knife is marketed. Now, my issues are primarily with the standard trapper, your 4 1/8 inch trapper with the long clip blade and the spade blade for a secondary blade. And I have no arguments about if the knife is good or bad. That is up to the individual who's carrying it. This particular one is a coal miner in the Rough Rider series. I'll show you every trapper I have in this video, every standard trapper I have in this video. So what's my grief about the trapper? It's purely on the fact that it is just one big marketing ploy, and it has continued now for over 100 years, and people need to know a little bit more of the facts of the pattern. This is not the knife with the clip blade and the spade blade that was being carried by the trappers in the 19th century. It is not the knife that won the West. The knife that won the West was probably more in line with this one here, which is a moose, and you'll see that the moose here has a more substantial clip blade, and on the other side it has a spade blade. But in the 19th century, they're more likely to have a spear blade instead of a spade blade. And this was the knife, the pocket knife that Nessmuk carried. He was an actual trapper. And in the 19th and early 20th century, that's the kind of knife that he would have been carrying. And then the other one that was really big is the muskrat. The muskrat was for small game and such. And it was also a very popular pattern with trappers, and it remains a popular pattern with trappers today. The other knife that would have been very big in the 19th century for use for trappers is right here, the old powder horn or the toothpick with that long clip blade. These are the knives that actually were being used in the 19th century by trappers, not the knife that we know and love or hate today as the trapper. It was all a marketing ploy by W.R. Case & Son, and obviously it worked quite well because it became their best-selling knife. Now let me clutter up the knife pile here and let's clean up the knife pile here. One of the reasons trappers are so popular is what you're seeing right there. You notice on the clip blade you got there, Remington, and then on the spade blade, First in the Field. You got two blades that you can engrave, and you can do all sorts of stuff. You can doll them all up and everything else. So it's a great pattern for doing all those commemoratives and memorials and all that other stuff. So every time Case wants to put out a knife that's going to commemorate something, they grab that trapper and they slap stuff all over two blades. This one isn't by Case, but you can see what happens here. So this is the lunar landing from 1969. Actually, it's the 50th anniversary of it. So you see on the first blade here, 1969 lunar landing from this is obviously by Kissing Crane, collector's edition. then on the other blade over here, 50th anniversary. You see there, 1969 to 2019. So we know when this knife came out, and we know what it was for. And notice it's serialized number 292. Can you get any more bling on this thing? You got abalone, you got the kissing crane shield. They should have just made that the boon. Anyway, you can see what I'm talking about. This is why trappers sell so. This is why so many trappers are sold, because they end up being used as commemorative knives, not because everyone is out there using a trapper all the time. That is especially the case with Case and Sons, WR Case and Sons. They make a ton of commemorative knives, and they doll them all up. They put all sorts of stuff on every blade, so they're not being used. They're just being sold or bought and sold, or sold and bought. So that's why their numbers are kind of artificial when it comes to popularity. You don't have a choice. If you want the commemorative, you gotta buy that Case trapper, because 90% of all commemorative knives put out by Case tend to be trappers. And as more and more companies go around saying, oh, trappers are real popular, we should do something about that. How can we market ourselves, and how can we take advantage of the trapper being the most popular knife in the world? Well, we'll take this big old folding hunter here, and we'll call it a jumbo trapper. And so while this has no blade on here that you can consider a spay blade, I mean, this is a Wharncliffe blade. It is a serrated Wharncliffe blade used for cutting bone or scaling a fish. And then you've got some kind of funky looking, very long, they're saying it's a clip blade, but I tell you what, it looks more like a very long Skinner blade to me. That does not look like your typical trapper blade in the least, not to mention it locks. But you know what? They call it a trapper, so that means it's going to sell better. So when I was joking about this, you know, would this have sold better if Rough Rider had said, instead of calling this the deluxe mushroom knife, maybe they should have called it the mushroom trapper? Who knows? Maybe then people go, oh, it's another trapper, I'm going to buy it. So that's the other thing with trappers. If you got a knife and you want to help with the sales, call it a trapper. Now let's move on to this knife. Now, I'm not trying to pick on Andy Armstrong at all with this knife. I like this knife. It's his bow trapper. I think that's upswept bow trapper. What on this knife makes it a trapper, other than somebody calling it a trapper? Because the blade is a trailing point Skinner blade, or an upswept Skinner blade. That's not a blade you find on a trapper. That handle definitely does not look like a trapper handle. I know some people say, well, it's kind of like a saddle horn trapper. Well, if it was a saddle horn trapper, why didn't they call it an upswept saddle horn trapper instead of a bow trapper? He gave it the name bow trapper. Nice knife and everything else, but the only reason this thing is called a trapper, as far as I can tell, is because they didn't want to call it an upswept jack. Bow Jack? Oh, I don't know. Bo Jackson. Ooh, that would have been a kind of cool name. Anyway, so suddenly this knife is a trapper. And that's the way it goes. You know, and that's the thing with quite a few other knives. Why isn't this one then called a trapper? Couldn't this one also be a trapper then? Would this have sold better if they would have called it a trapper? It's also got a skinning blade. It's also kind of got that shape of the handle, but it isn't bent quite nearly as much. And it's also got a lock on the back. So why isn't the 078 a trapper also? Couldn't this have been a lock back Barlow trapper or something like that? I don't know. Because let's face it, there are trappers that look like Barlows. Rough Rider gave this little knife the name of a baby trapper because, well, it's got a clip blade and it's got a little spay blade. Are you telling me that looks more like, oh, where is it at? This knife than it does this knife? This is a Barlow. If anything, you could have said it's a Barlow trapper or something like that. But it definitely looks like the bastard child of a Barlow and a trapper. But nowhere do they mention Barlow in the name. They just call it a baby trapper. I guess the daddy was the trapper. I don't know. But you see what I'm talking about. You throw trapper in the name and suddenly it's supposed to sell better. So all sorts of knives are called trappers that have deviated so far away from the standard trapper that they don't look anything like it anymore. But it's given the name trapper, and so that's one of the things that I have bones about. And so most of my issues with the trapper have nothing to do with the knife. It's just the way the name trapper is exploited, is shoved onto everything else out there, and well, it's the whole history of the knife is based off of a lie, a marketing ploy. That's kind of the things that get to me about the trapper. The thing is if you look hard enough, you'll find out that there is a lot of myths and mystiques about all knife brands out there, where they came from and everything else. A lot of it always comes down to very ingenious marketing. But anyway, the one that bothers me the most is the one that's on top, which is the trapper. Does that mean it's a bad knife? Does that mean you should not buy a trapper? Do I have disdain for people who love the trapper and carry the trapper and use it all the time? Absolutely not. However, it's not a pattern that I typically collect, but at the same time, I have said it many a times. You know what? If you're out there and you want to buy me a genuine case trapper with India sandbar stag handles, and you're going to pay the bill for it, go ahead and buy it and send it to me, and I will cherish it. Because hey, as long as you're going to have a trapper, you should have the top of the line, and the one that it would be the envy of a lot of other trapper collectors, and that is the one that a lot of people would say, yeah, that's the trapper I want. I want me a case trapper in India sandbar stag. Guess I wouldn't mind black pearl either, but don't have a bunch of stuff scribbled all over the blade. Just makes it look tacky. Anyway, I said I was going to show you every standard trapper I have in my collection, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. I will start by moving all the non-standard trappers away. Would all the non-standard trappers please leave the viewing screen? Okay, very first trapper I ever got, right here, and this is the only USA made trapper I have. It is a Remington trapper with, as you can tell, packawood handles. I think this was made sometime in the 1990s or so. It was given to me by a friend, and that friend actually bought this knife in the market square in, of all places, Baghdad, Iraq. So that's where this knife came from. It went all the way from the United States over to Iraq and came back to me. In any case, as you can see here, Remington, USA. This was actually made by Camillus. You've got Remington on the blade there, and then on the other blade, first in the field. Very nice knife, very first trapper I ever got, and I'm happy to have it. My next trapper, right here, this was in the Coal Miners series by Rough Rider. I bought it because I really just wanted to have the entire series. That's typically the way I end up getting trappers, is if I have a series, the last knife in that series that I will usually end up acquiring will be the trapper. And this was a less than inspiring series as far as I'm concerned, because all they did was they just a pad stamped coal miner on the blade, and didn't do much more to the series. So I was kind of disappointed in this series. And well, it had a lot of cool knives in it though. The electrician knife, the one with the little wrench on it. It had a nice sod buster and a couple other knives that were really cool. So I liked the series, or the knives in the series, but the series itself was kind of a letdown. But anyway, I still went ahead and got the coal miner trapper simply to complete the series. And then I bought this one from Rough Rider also, Helping Dogs Help Heroes. This was an organization that was raising money to provide animals, support animals for veterans. And so I bought the knife, Paws and Stripes, yeah. I bought the knife to help that program. I don't know whatever happened to the program. I don't know if it's still around today or not. But I bought it and it's like, okay, well, I've got one now. I've helped out a program. I thought it was a worthy cause, so I went ahead and got the Paws and Stripes trapper. Right after they did that one, they came out with the canoe, and I remember sending an email to Case saying, or I'm sorry, to Smoky Mountain Knife Works. Heck, if I'd have known you were going to be doing it on a canoe, I would have just waited and bought 2 canoes because I don't want the trapper. But anyway, that's the way it goes. And then I figured I'd just as well go ahead and get a proper white smooth bone trapper by Rough Rider. And the interesting thing is when Rough Rider was first doing all of its white smooth bone knives, they did not have a standard trapper in the release. It came out many years later. I think the standard trapper in the white smooth bone finally came out around 2010. It was not around in the beginning. They had a mini trapper, but they didn't have a standard trapper. The mini trapper was 3.5 inches. The standard is 4 1/8. So I went ahead and got a white smooth bone trapper. And then another one that I ended up having to get was right here. This was the one in the Stonework series. I was working on finishing up the Stonework series, so I bought this one, and I bought this one after the Stonework series had passed. And I wanted one that did not have the blade etch, because later on they came out with one with a blade etch on it, and I did not want that one. I wanted one from the first group. But then I decided I just as well get the second and third releases of the Stonework series. So that meant I had to go ahead and pick up another trapper with the stupid blade etch. So I went ahead and picked that up, and then shortly after picking up this one with a different blade edge, would you believe it, they came out and changed the stones in the trapper for the later release. So if you notice here, notice the way the handles look, different handles. So I decided, well, what the heck, I will go ahead and pick up that other one, even though it does have the blade edge. And so that's why I ended up having 3 nearly identical trappers in the Stonework series by Rough Rider. And then my final trapper I picked up is this one here. I already showed it to you, and it's because for me the lunar landing in 1969 was kind of a big deal, so I wanted something to commemorate that moment. And the fact that I was there for the big event way back in 1969, and I'm still around for the 50th anniversary of it. To me, that was that's something kind of cool. Had I found the Swiss Knife Shop commemorative knife before I bought this trapper, I probably would not have bought the trapper. But now that I have it, I'm keeping it. In any case, there you have it. That's my entire collection of trappers. Now, for some people, that's quite a few. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 trappers. 3 of them nearly identical. But that is it for all of my standard trappers. And when you consider my collection of knives is at least 1,000, maybe more, 8 trappers really isn't that many. The only knife I have fewer of, I think, in my collection, fewer patterns, is knives that are very obscure and, well, leg knives. I guess I like leg knives less than I like trappers. But beyond that, this is my least collected pattern of knife other than the leg knife. Any case, there you have it. If you collect trappers, good for you. I hope you enjoy them. If you don't collect trappers, don't give grief to people who do collect trappers. It's a big hobby. We can all have fun, even trapper lovers and haters. And that's something we can agree on. Just go out there and have fun doing your collecting.
Thanks for dropping by Knife Chats with Tobias. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up, leave a comment below, and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you know when the next episode is up and online.